Next up here is the terms reverse racism and reverse sexism. This has been in controversy a lot lately in regards to how people are perceiving oppression versus the oppressed, dominant groups versus, oppressed groups, if you will, majority versus minority. So I'm going to talk about how I actually don't believe that reverse racism exists. Okay, so hear me out. First, we're going to take a look at the actual dictionary definitions of what racism and sexism are. And then I will go look at reverse racism and reverse sexism. And then we're going to compare both of them together in the topic of social justice warriors and gender politics. So here we go. Sexism. Sexism, or gender discrimination, is prejudice or discrimination based on a person's sex or gender. Sexism can affect any gender, but it is particularly documented as affecting women and girls. It has been linked to stereotypes and gender roles and may include the belief that one sex or gender is intrinsically superior to another. Extreme sexism may foster sexual harassment, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. Take a look at that sentence that says sexism can affect any gender, which means that sexism towards men do exist. Sexism towards transgender people exist. And sexism, of course, exists against women. Right? So hold on to that thought. And next up here, racism. Racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Modern variants are often based in social perceptions of biological differences between peoples. These can take the form of social actions, practices or beliefs, or political systems that consider different races to be ranked as inherently superior or inferior to each other based on presumed shared inheritable traits, abilities, or qualities. It may also hold that members of different races should be treated differently. So these are the main definitions of both racism and sexism. I think it's pretty standard. Basically, if you are part of a race and another race thinks that they are superior to yours and talk down to you, insult you, apply it to stereotypes, they are in fact discriminating against you and or being racist. Okay, we can agree that this is wrong, that these are bad things because everybody should be treated equally, or at least with due respect. In regards to sexism, again, it's perceived that men are superior and women are inferior, and transgender as a new thing as inferior as well. So basically, if you are part of a majority, you don't suffer these things, according to feminists. And that minorities, if you are part of that kind of group, that you are actually being oppressed and deal with these a lot more. So whites versus blacks, men versus women, gay versus straight, it could be even older people versus younger people, any type of these spectrums that have two opposing sides. One is usually oppressed and the other one is the oppressor. And now let's look at reverse sexism and reverse racism, shall we? Reverse racism is a phenomenon in which discrimination, sometimes officially sanctioned, against a dominant or formerly dominant racial or other group representative of the majority in a particular society takes place for a variety of reasons, often initially as an attempt at readdressing past wrongs. All right, so take for example that I, as a white male, born completely out of my control, is raised in a society which supposedly benefits me simply for the color of my skin, right? And anybody else of not white origins or white skin or the white race is seen as a minority, okay? However, apparently a white person can be racist towards a black person or a minority group or any other person of color, and that is seen as racist. But when a black person or a minority or person of color is just as racist back, feminists don't think this exists, right? Reverse racism doesn't exist.
Reverse racism is not a thing.
Right? You can't be racist towards the majority of races, which is supposedly white, and therefore you can't actually be racist towards your oppressors. Now, I think this is bullshit, okay? So I will say that reverse racism does not exist because in the end, it's only racism. So you can sugarcoat it as much as you want, feminists, or you can say that reverse racism includes power plus prejudice. However, that is how you've redefined racism, okay? Because when it happens to you, right, you don't like that, okay? So you're entitled to get away with calling out white people as racist, but when a white person gets discriminated against by a person of color, for instance, this somehow is not the same thing. That this is somehow different. And the only way that you've accomplished this is because you've added plus power to the definition. And that you, in order to be racist, you have to have a position of power plus the prejudice. And since, according to you, black people don't have any power, people of color such as Mexicans and Spanish people, Asians don't hold power against white people. So therefore, when they wish to kill all white men, that's not being racist. Right. So here, take for example, is Bahar Mustafa, a student diversity officer who came to prominence in a race row after allegedly tweeting the hashtag #KillAllWhiteMen. And she's been charged by police while sending a threatening communication. So basically a diversity officer in a school setting, which is supposed to promote diversity of all people, of all colors, of all walks of life, decided to halt white men from attending these meetings, from attending these discussions, because she probably thinks in her mind that all white, cis, straight men are a threat, that they are the oppressors in this world. So she put up a hashtag, #KillAllWhiteMen, on Twitter, and everybody jumped up on this. In my opinion, yeah, no, she definitely is a racist. She likes to say that she's not being racist because she holds no power, being a diversity officer at a college, university level institution. Oh yeah, no, she certainly doesn't have any power whatsoever.
I said it before and I'll say it again. I represent the most marginalised people at Goldsmiths. Furthermore, there have been charges made against me that I am racist and sexist to white men. I want to explain why this is false. I, an ethnic minority woman, cannot be racist or sexist towards white men because racism and sexism describe structures of privilege based on race and gender. And therefore women of colour and minority genders cannot be racist or sexist since we do not stand to benefit from such a system. Reverse racism and reverse sexism are not real.
This article here continues. Mustafa was initially accused of racism for asking white men not to attend a students' union meeting intended for ethnic minority women and non-binary attendees. What I really find interesting is that in regards to the race debate, when groups get together to discuss certain important topics such as racism and negative stereotypes and how to find solutions to these problems, if white people were to hold events like this, they are forced to include people of color, gays and trans people, anybody who's part of a minority group. And to do so, if they exclude them, this is seen as racist. But here we have an example of the complete opposite, where a diversity officer who identifies as a non-white person is holding a meeting in regards to minority women, promoting diversity, and then rejecting white men. So she's done the exact same thing here, but somehow she's not racist. And when people have claimed that actually it's just reverse racism, feminists will go in and say it's no such thing because it's power plus prejudice. And since minorities don't have power, therefore they can only be prejudiced, which is different than being racist. And if you look up on such websites such as EverdayFeminism, there was an article that said why reverse oppression simply cannot exist no matter what Merriam-Webster says. So here we go, feminists ignoring definitions based on sexism and racism, which are two very real things, while at the same time, getting upset when people use the definition of feminism in their arguments against how feminists are not actually for equality. They'll jump on that saying that this definition is right, but ignore this definition over here because of feelings. If you take a look at this article, basically it's just also suggesting that terms such as reverse racism, female privilege, and cisphobia cannot possibly exist because the very nature of oppression won't allow it to. So here they are framing and changing definitions in order to fit their narrative. There is such a thing as female privilege just as much as there is male privilege. Females get advantages in certain areas of society, whereas men get different advantages in different areas of society. Gay people have certain advantages, and trans people also have advantages. So for this website to imply that female privilege does not exist, what? This is what we have to deal with. And if you read further down in this godforsaken article, she even has the nerve to say, furthermore, I want to tell you a secret about the dictionary. It is in and of itself an oppressive force. All resources that deal with the rules of language are. Ah, I see. So if the dictionary is oppressive force, probably in part of the patriarchy, so does that mean that the definition of feminist and feminism is in fact an oppressive force? See, this whole mental gymnastics that feminists are failing to understand when they mean one thing and say another, or they apply one negative thing to a word, such as reverse racism and sexism, but don't apply it to their words that they use in a means to win their arguments. Oh, but the feminist definition says it's about equality. Well, we're saying that the actions don't fit that definition, and therefore that definition is null. Oh, but let's just forget about the other words in the dictionary because of feelings. Now, if you take a look at boysmeneducation.com, there was an issue in regards to reverse racism and sexism applied to humanities textbooks. So back in February 2014, basically there was promotion of sexism right within our textbooks. So not only is this going on online, but now we have reached the point where these words, these terms, this brainwashing is happening to our students at a college and university level. So if you take a look right there, it says even right here, stop, there's no such thing as reverse racism or reverse sexism, or the reverse of any form of oppression. While women can be just as prejudiced as men, women cannot be just as sexist as men because they do not hold political, economic, and institutional power. What a bunch of bullshit. Oppression is oppression no matter which direction it's applied to. Women can be oppressive to men, such cases as domestic violence, abuse, verbal abuse, okay? That is a state of oppression. Power comes at those who are able to recognize this power and use it in the means that they want to. Now, power can be a good thing when applied in the right manner that benefits all and doesn't benefit one over another, but generally that's not how power works. Men have been in power, and now women are in power. Are you willing to tell me, feminists, that there is absolutely no one, not one woman, who holds political power in this world, or any female in social media who don't have power? Are you completely ignorant to these things? Okay, there are tons of women, tons of black people, tons of other people of color, Asians, Mexicans, gay people, and trans people who are making their place in the world. They hold power. And they are now starting to have institutional power. Okay, it can be argued that they've held institutional power for all their lives, but that's another tale. So these people are in a state of power, and then when they associate themselves with racist tendencies or sexist tendencies, that is power plus prejudice. That means that they are being racist and sexist, and since white people and white men are part of a race, are part of a gender, they too can be discriminated against. They too can be oppressed. Bullshit.